Welcome to Module 4 in EDU510. We're now officially in the second half of the course, so congratulations. You've learned a lot and you've done a lot of great work, and so here we go into the second half of the course. For Module 4, your readings for this particular module are going to come out of Creswell, as they have from many of the others. And you're going to be looking at, in particular, chapters 5 and 6, where Creswell goes into great detail and very worthwhile detail about how you actually do quantitative research. What kinds of things do you need to be paying attention to, and how is it that as researchers you can actually organize your research. The Gorard article is I think a very interesting one. I'm not a quantitative researcher. I don't pretend to be. I don't have that kind of background. And in fact, my only statistics course was a survey course that I took when I was doing my doctorate. We never did get the SPSS that had been ordered. And so most of the course was simply talking about how you actually put together a survey. So that part I'm comfortable with, but the actual kind of analysis that's possible with SPSS, which is one of the technologies that Creswell talks about, I learned almost nothing about. So I can't claim any kind of expertise in this area whatsoever. But I would recommend Gorard because even to my feeble non-mathematical brain, he makes a lot of sense. For those who are mathematicians in the group, I envy you because you're going to be able to sail through these readings. For those who are not, it's going to be a bit of a slog, I would suggest. It was for me anyway. But nevertheless, it's worth it because you come out the other end with a body of knowledge that is going to be very helpful to you in a variety of ways. And we'll be talking about that a little later in this little video. Your assignment, there's only one assignment this module. It's the forum discussion groups, and of course, as usual, you'll find the question for your discussion under the tab in Module 4. The expectation, as it has been and as it will continue to be increasingly as you do more readings, is the expectation that you will use the readings to inform your reflection and discussion. So whenever you've written something like, I think, I believe, it seems to me, I want you to stop right there and think about, why is it that I think that? Why is it that I believe that? Why does it seem to you? And if it's based on common sense, practical experience, name your source. If it's preferably coming out of the readings, then name your source again. And of course, use your usual referencing and citation methods that we've been talking about all along. Because Module 6 is going to be quite heavy with assignments, there's only one reading, but there are, and it's more of a review in many ways. There are lots of assignments in that module, so I'll warn you of that already. And I will actually, in the next probably 3 or 4 days, I will be opening up Module 6 to you. It won't have all of the content, but you'll be able to go in and you'll be able to look more specifically at the assignments and be thinking about how you're going to organize for that. So I just say that as a bit of a heads up, so that as you're thinking about the course and as you're thinking about your organization of your time and so on, that may be helpful. All right, so let's think about what is quantitative research. Well, we already know a fair amount from Creswell and also from Guba and Lincoln, and we've learned that it is systematic, as is any kind of research, but it's organized in a particular way in terms of its systematic analysis. It's empirical, that is, it is based on observable phenomena. So we're not talking about meaning, we're not talking about understanding, we're not talking about internal processes, only as they can be demonstrated through observable phenomena. So it's empirical in that sense, and it can be quantified. So those are the criteria for quantitative research. Because it's necessary for it to be quantified, we use statistical, mathematical, or computational techniques. And of course, Creswell and your other reading, Brad, is going to talk as well about those techniques. It confirms predetermined hypotheses. So unlike qualitative analysis, where you, in many senses, come to an understanding, and you begin with kind of a general question, but then you come to an understanding of that question. Rather, it confirms, or in some cases disconfirms, a predetermined hypothesis in quantitative research. It is objective. Now, this, of course, is a debatable contention, and there's a lot of literature that would suggest that no form of research is in fact objective, in the sense that the researcher can separate themselves entirely from the phenomena being studied. When you think about, for example, the way in which Creswell, and you'll come to this in chapter 5 and chapter 6, he talks about the ways in which a quantitative researcher would develop questions, would be able to think about how they're going to get to the data that they're wanting to get to confirm their hypothesis. Well, many would argue that that hypothesis actually comes out of a subjective analysis of lived experience, and it also, when you're developing questions that can be quantified, they come out of lived experience as well. So in fact, you may base it on literature that you have been reading. So it's bounded by what you have learned from that literature. It's bounded by your cultural experience and so on. So we can't claim total objectivity, but to the degree that it is possible, there is an attempt in, and this is my reading, there is an attempt in quantitative research to make it as objective as possible. It examines relationships between variables, and I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. So what is quantitative research, and how does it help us understand social phenomena? Well, these are some of the ways in which it does that in the kind of descriptors that we've been talking about. And of course, Creswell and Gerard go into this in much greater detail. So what are descriptive and inferential statistics? Well, I'd like to look at a video.
Hello and welcome to the first statistics lecture. Because this is the first lecture, we're going to be starting off with some of the most basic concepts, and right now I'm going to teach you about descriptive and inferential statistics. So first of all, what is statistics? Well, statistics is the science of collecting, organizing, and analyzing data. Data being facts or pieces of information. Now I'm going to give you 3 examples of data, like the ages of students in your statistics class, or the genders of the last 8 people to walk by, or even 5 randomly measured IQ scores. Basically, any information you can collect is data, and then you'll eventually do math with that or something. So when people talk about statistics, they're usually talking about 2 main divisions. There's descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. Descriptive statistics consists of organizing and summarizing data, while inferential statistics consists of using the data you've measured to form conclusions, usually about other data. Now I'm going to give you an example of these 2 things. So let's say there are 20 statistics classes at your university, and you've collected the ages of the students in one class. And right below I have, 15 ages that you have hypothetically collected from different people in your class. A descriptive question that could be asked about this data is, what's the most common age of student in your statistics class? Which, in this case would be 18 because you have the most 18s out of everything. And an inferential question that could be asked about this data is, are the ages of the students in this classroom similar to what you would expect in a normal statistics class at this university? See that the first one is just asking us to describe data, while the second one is asking an additional question about that data. Now, the data you get will be drawn from either populations or samples, usually samples, but I'm going to explain both. Now, the population is the group that you're interested in studying, and the sample is a subset of that population. Basically, your sample comes from the population, as shown in the diagram below. So, let's say you want to find the average GPA of a student at your university. Your university has 20,000 students, and you randomly select 100 of them and ask them what their GPA is. In this case, the group that you're interested in studying, your population, is that 20,000 students, and your sample is that smaller group of 100 students that you've taken from the population. And for the first video, that's all I really want to talk about. I want you to have a strong idea of what statistics is and, a vague idea of what data is. Know the difference between descriptive and inferential statistics. And
Okay, so now that we have a better understanding of what descriptive and inferential statistics are, I want to look at a study that I did where I was interested based on work that I had done with the ATA and their equity and diversity, equity, and human rights committee. I think it was at the time, and we had a particular subcommittee or subset around questions of gender in education. And as there was a lot of discussion at that time about the number of male teachers compared to the number of female teachers, boys in schools, all of that kind of stuff. We had done a significant literature review looking at this particular phenomenon. So I wanted to look at this question in greater depth, and I wanted to think about this based on the Alberta context. So my population then was the Alberta teachers. My sample were beginning teachers, and I chose that sample because from my perspective, they had made the decision to become teachers in relative to the larger population. They had made that decision not that long ago, obviously, because they were just beginning. And so they were more aware than perhaps some of the teachers who had been teaching for some time would have been. So that was one of the reasons. And of course, the other was just simply the simplicity of it, because they get together at the beginning of their career or soon after their career starts at a conference that's put together by the ATA, and I believe the boards cooperate as well. And these beginning teachers then come together and talk about various issues that are of interest to beginning teachers. So there was kind of a captive population in one place, so that was helpful. And because the ATA was willing to let me do this and let me collect this data. So I put together a survey using items that had come out of that literature review and some other work that I had done over the years. So that was my sample, the beginning teachers. For obvious reasons, I wasn't going to be able to do all of the teachers in Alberta, but it seemed to me that it was legitimate to choose this particular sample. My variable was around the question of gender, so I had a subset of female beginning teachers and male beginning teachers. So this is how I constructed my study. So the question is then, is it descriptive or inferential? Well, Creswell makes a statement in his, I believe it's in chapter 5, where he talks about the fact that when you are comparing two populations or more, that it by necessity becomes inferential. And I'm taking Creswell at his word, and the mathematicians among you may disagree, and if you do, then let's talk about it in our discussion groups. But I'm suggesting this was an inferential study, and certainly I made inferences based on the findings that came out of that. So in looking at the sample size, I had 341 teachers, a substantial number of beginning teachers. In fact, most of those who attended this conference. That wouldn't have been every beginning teacher, obviously, in Alberta, but it was a significant enough size of sample to be able to justify giving some credence to the results. Of that sample, 81% were female and 19% were male. Again, this was representative of the gender population of teaching in various provinces in Canada, and certainly in the province of Alberta. So in thinking about this survey then, my larger question was, why are there more females than males in teaching in Alberta? I chose to try to tease out some of the aspects of this using a survey. My population, as I've already said, was all the teachers in Alberta. My sample was beginning teachers in Alberta. The variable was gender. The hypothesis was that males choose a career in teaching based on different criteria and at different life stages than females. So let's look at one of the questions that came out of that survey that would suggest that the hypothesis is correct and teases out some of the ways in which that actually gets acted out. So in this case, the question was, when did you make the decision to become a teacher? And I gave several choices. So elementary school, during secondary school, during the time when you were doing your undergraduate degree, or other. And so of the males and females, many more females decided than males during elementary school. About a similar number, although slightly more females, decided during secondary school, and a substantially much larger population of the sample of males decided to become teachers during their undergraduate degree. And then we have an equal number of others. And out of other questions, we found that came out of, in the case of women, it came out of after their children were grown or were at a stage in their lives when it was easier to pursue a career. So they had done their undergraduate degree and thought about teaching, but hadn't actually decided to embark on a career until they came to a later stage in their lives. For the men, that other category tended to be when they had tried another career, had found it less than satisfying, and decided to go into teaching. So these were some of the kinds of findings that came out. So we established the hypothesis and also established some interesting wonderings for further research, so further surveys, or it could be qualitative analysis and so on. But then the question becomes, and of course this is a question that I had asked myself when I came to even teaching this module, what if I know nothing about statistics? As I've suggested, I know very little about statistics. I didn't take a statistics course in my undergrad because I became enamored with the arts and so left behind the social sciences that I had originally thought I'd be pursuing. And so had no need to take a statistics course. At this point, I kind of wish I had, but I didn't. So I needed then, and you will need, to have a general awareness of the processes used in quantitative research, and Creswell and Gerard provide that, I think, very well. I need to know some of the most common terms that are used and what they actually mean. And so when I'm reading a study, I can make a judgment about whether or not that researcher has followed the criteria that are necessary to do a good quantitative study. So in other words, I can become a knowledgeable consumer of research. Now that's important as a researcher. It's an important aspect of your life as a professional as well. So that when you are reading research that pertains to your own practice, you can make a judgment about whether that quantitative research is substantial and is verifiable, and therefore, you can rely on its outcomes in applying it to your own practice. Or it may be the basis for some policies that have been put forward, and you can make a decision about whether, in fact, that policy has been based on some kind of legitimate grounds. And you can use, as I do, reliable sources when you're making those kinds of decisions. When I'm reading a quantitative paper, to be honest, I don't go through all of the long description about the various methods that researcher used. I depend on the quality of the journal to make that decision. So, for example, if I'm using Educational Administration Quarterly, I know that that's a very reputable journal. It's well reviewed, and it's reviewed by knowledgeable reviewers. And as a result, when I'm reading a quantitative study, I look at the beginning where they describe the study, and I look at the end where they talk about their findings. And I don't read a whole lot of what goes in between. So, so I maybe shouldn't admit that. But if I were to, I would be able to use the information that I've gained from reading Creswell and Gerard. So I leave that then to you to read the readings for this module carefully. Bring your discussion and your questions and your analysis to the discussion forums, and I look very much forward to reading them and to learning more from you about quantitative research.